The Vanishing of Willowbrook. The year was 1968. A chilling silence descended upon the Willowbrook Orphanage, a silence far deeper than the absence of children's laughter. 43 young souls, 6 devoted staff members, all gone. Not a trace, not a whisper. The grand old building, perched stoically on Route 47, stood empty, a hollow monument to a mass disappearance. No frantic searches, no missing person alerts, no shattered windows or forced entries to hint at struggle. The official narrative, whispered and then enshrined in dusty files, spoke of renovations, of relocations to better facilities. But the records, those crucial threads of truth, were conspicuously absent. No new homes, no new names, just a void where Willowbrook's residents once were. For 4 long decades, the orphanage became a ghost story. Its proud brick facade crumbled, its windows stared blankly like vacant eyes, and its secrets festered behind decaying plaster and splintered wood. Time became its accomplice, burying the truth deeper with every fallen leaf, every cracked pane. Then came 2008. Ruth Caldwell, a woman driven by a longing to find the missing piece of her own past, her birth mother, found herself drawn to the desolate husk of Willowbrook. She knew only one name, Grace Caldwell, and one location, this forgotten orphanage. The building was a mausoleum of memories, a labyrinth of shadows and dust. It was in the matron's abandoned quarters, amidst the detritus of a life abruptly ended, that Ruth stumbled upon a hidden panel. With a grunt of effort, she forced it open, revealing a space that made the blood freeze in her veins. A hidden room, and within it, an army of dolls. Antique, porcelain, cloth, wooden, each doll a silent sentinel, meticulously labeled with a child's name and a date. Within the hollow shell of each, a child's most cherished possession, a faded photograph of a mother's smile, a gleaming war medal belonging to a proud father, a lucky penny clutched tight in a tiny hand, and with each treasure, a fragile, yellowed note. Return when you come back from your Christmas families. 43 dolls, 43 promises broken, 43 children who believed they were coming home. Ruth's discovery wasn't just a revelation, it was an earthquake, shattering the carefully constructed silence of 40 years. It opened a cold case, exposing a monstrous truth. A man who trafficked children like commodities, building an empire on the sorrow of their disappearance. The road to Millbrook. The unsealed adoption papers felt impossibly light in Ruth Caldwell's hands, yet their weight pressed down on her soul. She read the words again, her eyes tracing the elegant script as she idled at a red light. 45 years old, and finally, a name. Grace Caldwell, 15 years old. Mother's residence, Willowbrook Orphanage, Millbrook County. The light clicked green, but Ruth remained frozen, lost in the stark revelations of the document. A horn blared impatiently from behind her, yanking her back to the present. Millbrook, a town that seemed to exist in the margins, a forgotten pause between 2 other places. 2 gas stations, each whispering tales of bygone eras. A solitary diner, its neon sign flickering a lonely welcome. A general store, a chaotic symphony of necessities, selling everything from hunting ammunition to powdered baby formula. Millbrook wasn't a destination. It was a waypoint, a place people passed through without a second glance, unless, of course, they had a reason to disturb its slumbering secrets. Ruth pulled her car into a cracked parking spot outside Coleman's Diner. The bell above the door chimed a melancholy welcome as she pushed through. 3 local men, perched like silent gargoyles at the counter, turned in unison. Their synchronized gaze, sharp and assessing, was the unspoken language of a small town, a silent roster of who belonged and who was a stranger. Before Ruth could even voice her order, the waitress, a woman whose name tag proclaimed Dolly, was already pouring coffee. The rich, dark liquid streamed into the cup, a comforting ritual in an unnerving place. Ruth offered a small nod of thanks. "I'm looking for some information," she began, her voice carefully neutral, "about an old building." She retrieved her phone, the screen glowing with a single grainy photograph she'd found online. Willowbrook Orphanage, 1965. Children, a fleeting image of innocence, played in the sun-drenched yard. A young woman, her face bright with a smile, stood among them. "This place," she clarified, pushing the phone across the worn counter. The name hung in the air, heavy and unwelcome. Dolly's hand froze mid-pour. The coffee, oblivious, continued its steady stream, overflowing the cup, spilling into the saucer. "Sorry," Dolly mumbled, snatching a dishcloth. Her movements flustered as she mopped at the dark liquid. "That place. Nobody asks about that place." A subtle shift rippled through the diner. The man at the far end of the counter, his coveralls streaked with the grease of 1,000 repairs, pushed himself up. He dropped a $5 bill onto the counter, avoiding eye contact. "Dolly, I gotta get back to the shop." Another man, his breakfast half-eaten, echoed the sentiment. "Me too." Within 90 seconds, Ruth sat utterly alone at the counter, the silence pressing in around her. Dolly continued to wipe the same spot, her efforts making the stain worse, not better. "Are you family of someone?" Dolly ventured, her voice barely a whisper. "Maybe," Ruth replied, her gaze unwavering. "My mother was there. Grace Caldwell." Dolly shook her head. "Don't know any names. Before my time." Her eyes darted nervously to the window, as if expecting something to appear. "But if you're smart, you'll let it be. Nothing good comes from digging up Willowbrook." "Where is it? The building?" "Route 47, Dolly conceded, her voice barely audible. "About 4 miles west." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Earl Hensley. He was the groundskeeper back then. Still lives out that way. He don't like visitors." A pause, then a deeper chill. "And Vernon Whitmore. He owned it. He really don't like questions." "Vernon Whitmore is still alive?" asked Ruth, a new thread of intrigue taking hold. "Oh yeah," Dolly confirmed, straightening up as if summoned by an unseen force. "The richest man in 3 counties. Owns half the town. The other half owes him money." As if on cue, the bell above the door chimed. "Earl," Dolly murmured, her eyes widening slightly. "Speak of the devil!" An unwelcome presence. The old man who shuffled through the diner's entrance moved with the stiffness of rusted hinges, each step a deliberate, painful effort. A flannel shirt, oblivious to the stifling heat, covered his gaunt frame, held in place by faded suspenders. His eyes, a startlingly clear blue, set deep in a web of wrinkles, swept the room, bypassing Dolly, bypassing the empty counter, landing with unnerving precision on Ruth, then on her phone, still displaying the haunting image of Willowbrook Orphanage. "You're asking about Willowbrook?" he rasped, his voice rough as gravel. It wasn't a question, but an accusation. Ruth nodded, a tremor running through her. Earl's jaw worked, as if grinding something bitter between his teeth. "Why?" "My mother was there," Ruth stated, her voice steadier than she felt. "In 1968. "No, she wasn't." Earl's voice was flat, devoid of emotion, yet infused with an undeniable finality. Place was empty by then. But the records say... Records are wrong. Earl moved closer, bringing with him the heavy scent of stale tobacco and wood smoke. His eyes, fixed on Ruth, held a desperate intensity, the kind that comes from a soul burdened by unspeakable secrets. You seem like a nice lady. Got a family? A daughter? His gaze softened for a fleeting moment, then hardened again. Then go home to her. Forget Willowbrook. Forget your mother was ever there. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a low growl. Some doors, you open 'em, you can't close 'em again. A beat of chilling silence. And Vernon Whitmore, he's got ways of making people wish they'd never asked questions. With that, Earl turned, his departure as abrupt as his arrival. He reached the door, then paused, his hand on the cold metal. If you're fool enough to go out there anyway, he rasped, not looking back, don't go alone, and don't go at night. He shook his head, a gesture of profound weariness. And whatever you find, sometimes the truth ain't worth knowing. The bell chimed, a final mournful note, and he was gone. Dolly, her hands now steady, poured fresh coffee. Earl's a good man, she murmured, watching the door. Drinks too much since his wife died, but good. If he says leave it alone. Ruth didn't respond, her mind reeling. Where exactly on Route 47? Dolly sighed, a long, drawn-out sound of resignation. Old iron gates, mostly fallen now. Dirt road about a quarter-mile in. Her voice dropped again, filled with an unsettling mixture of fear and local lore. Buildings still standing barely. Kids go out there sometimes, dare each other to go inside. Most don't make it past the front door. Why? Ruth pushed, a knot tightening in her stomach. Dolly's voice became a whisper, fragile as spun glass. Because sometimes they hear things, voices crying, and there's the dolls. Dolls? Ruth scoffed, trying to dismiss it. Just stories, kids' imagination. But even as she said it, Dolly's hand trembled slightly as she refilled her coffee cup. You really going out there? Dolly asked, her eyes pleading. Ruth placed a $20 bill on the counter, more than enough. My mother was 15 when she had me. 15, alone and pregnant in that place. Her voice hardened with a resolve that brooked no argument. I need to know what happened to her. The shadow of Willowbrook. Route 47 stretched ahead, a tunnel of pine forest and encroaching shadows. The air grew heavier, cooler, as Ruth drove deeper into the quiet desolation. She found the iron gates just as Dolly described, one hanging precariously by a single hinge, a gaping maw, the other completely fallen, swallowed by years of undergrowth. The dirt road beyond was a barely discernible path, choked with weeds and fallen leaves, but passable. Ruth slowed the rental car, the branches of ancient trees scraping against its sides like grasping fingers. The forest pressed in close, devouring the last vestiges of the afternoon sun, plunging the path into an early twilight. Then, abruptly, the trees receded, pulling back like a curtain on a forgotten stage. And there it was. Willowbrook Orphanage. It loomed 3 stories tall, a monstrous silhouette against the bruised sky. Red brick, once vibrant, was now blackened with mold and decay. Windows stared out, either shattered or crudely boarded over, like sightless eyes. The front entrance, a ghost of its former grandeur, with once white columns, now resembled a gaping mouth filled with broken, jagged teeth. Kudzu, a relentless green tide, had consumed the entire east wing, dragging it slowly, inexorably, back into the earth. Yet the west wing stood straighter, less ravaged, almost defiant, as if something within its walls had repelled the march of 40 years of abandonment.
Ruth parked, cutting the engine, and sat in the sudden, profound silence. Every primal instinct screamed at her to leave, to turn the car around, to forget this place, to erase the name Willowbrook from her mind. But the thought of Grace, her young, vulnerable mother, alone within these walls, fueled a different kind of courage. Instead, she grabbed her flashlight and her phone, testing the voice recorder app. Whatever happened to her mother here, whatever unspeakable fate befell those children, someone needed to bear witness. The front door, hanging precariously on a single hinge, creaked open with a protesting groan as Ruth pushed through. The smell hit her first, a cloying, suffocating cocktail of mildew, rot, and something else, something sweet, yet deeply, fundamentally wrong. Wallpaper hung in tattered strips, like peeling skin from a long-dead creature. A grand staircase, half its steps collapsed into a jagged abyss, climbed into impenetrable darkness. Yet through the debris, faint paths were visible, trails worn through decades of dust and fallen plaster, hinting at other footsteps, more recent passages.
Ruth followed one such path, drawn towards the west wing through what must have been the administrative offices. File cabinets stood open, empty and plundered. Desks were overturned, their secrets scattered. But one door at the end of the hall was different, solid, newer. It stood apart, a silent anomaly in the pervasive decay. A tarnished brass nameplate, green with age, confirmed her suspicion. Matron's quarters. Inside, the preservation was unsettling, like stepping not just into a different room, but into a different time. 2008 vanished, replaced by 1968. A bed, its quilt barely dusted, stood ready. A desk with papers still neatly stacked. And on the far wall, a bookshelf that didn't quite fit, too shallow for the space, its presence a subtle discord in the meticulously preserved room. It looked like it was hiding something. Ruth pulled at it. It shouldn't have moved, but it did. The hinges screamed in protest, a banshee wail in the profound silence. Behind it, another door. This one painted white, adorned with a simple brass lock, long ago broken, its purpose defeated. The hidden room was narrow, perhaps 8 feet by 12. No windows, no other entrance, a tomb of secrets. But the walls were lined, shelf upon shelf, with dolls. Dozens of them, all different. Some delicate porcelain, some soft cloth, others crudely carved from wood. Each one meticulously placed, facing forward, like an expectant audience, like silent witnesses. A fine layer of dust covered them, but carefully, as if someone had tried to preserve them, to protect them. Ruth's flashlight beam swept across their faces. Some eyes were painted open, staring into the void. Others were closed, in an eternal, eerie slumber. All of them were wrong, somehow. Too heavy-looking, too substantial. A yellowed paper was tacked to one shelf, its typewritten words still eerily clear. Personal effects storage. Each child's treasured items secured until retrieval. December 15th, 1968. December 15th, 1968. The date echoed the promised return from Christmas families, a date that would never come. Ruth reached for the nearest doll, a porcelain girl in a faded blue dress. It felt impossibly heavy, far more than it should. Something rattled faintly inside. The porcelain doll's dress, stiff with age, was adorned with tiny buttons down the back, tarnished green like ancient copper. Ruth's fingers, trembling now with a mixture of dread and urgency, fumbled to undo them. The body underneath was hollow ceramic, but someone had cut a neat, square hole in the back, sealed with what looked like carpenter's glue, expertly disguised. She found her car key, its metallic edge a stark contrast to the delicate porcelain, and carefully pried at the edges. The seal cracked, a small triumphant sound in the silence. Inside, nestled in the dark hollow, lay a tarnished medallion on a chain, St. Christopher carrying a child across water, a symbol of safe passage, and a folded piece of paper, brittle as autumn leaves, its edges frayed. She unfolded it gently. Tommy Randall, age 7. St. Christopher from Papa. Hold until Christmas adoption. Echoes in porcelain. Ruth's throat tightened, a sudden constriction of fear and sorrow. Carefully, almost reverently, she placed Tommy's St. Christopher medallion on the dusty matron's desk. Her hand, now steady with a grim purpose, reached for another doll. This one was cloth, dressed like a baby, its tiny form surprisingly rigid. Something hard nestled deep within its stuffed belly. She found the seam, worn thin with age, and with delicate, determined fingers, carefully pulled it apart. A woman's wedding ring, gold worn smooth and thin by countless years, fell into her palm. Inside the band, an inscription, too small to decipher in the fading light of her flashlight beam. Another note, brittle and yellowed, identified its owner. Alice Henley, age 5. Mama's ring, promised she could wear it when she's grown. Henley. The name struck Ruth with the force of a blow. Earl's last name was Henley. The next doll yielded a tarnished pocket watch, its hands frozen, no longer ticking. Its note, James Morrison, age 9, grandfather's watch, still works if you wind it. Another, a small leather Bible, a pressed flower, fragile as a ghost, tucked between its pages. Mary Catherine, age 8, first communion gift from Sister Agnes. Ruth worked systematically, a silent, grim archivist of forgotten lives. Her phone, its screen a small beacon in the oppressive darkness, became her tool. A photograph of each doll, a photograph of the hidden treasure within, a photograph of the heartbreaking note. Her hands, initially trembling, now moved with a practiced rhythm, each terrible discovery adding to the mounting evidence. 17 dolls opened. 17 precious, catalogued treasures. Then, behind the last row of silent witnesses, she found it. A leather-bound ledger, its cover embossed with fading gold letters, Willowbrook Orphanage Registry. Inside, entries in precise, almost clinical handwriting detailed the lives that had passed through these doors. December 1st, 1968. Mary K. admitted. Parents deceased, automobile accident. December 3rd, 1968. Tommy R. transferred from St. Augustine's, behavioral issues. December 8th, 1968. Alice H. abandoned at entrance, approximately age 5. The entries continued, a meticulous chronicle, until December 14th. Then the handwriting shifted abruptly, becoming rushed and slanted, betraying a frantic urgency. December 15th, 1968. Special Placement Initiative. VW approved. All remaining residents relocated. Personal effects secured pending retrieval. 43 names followed, ages ranging from 3 to 16. Ruth photographed every page, her heart pounding a frantic drum against her ribs. She scanned the list, searching, dreading, hoping. Then, near the end, she found it. Grace Caldwell, age 15, admitted March 1968, pregnant, father unknown, baby due January 1969.
Her mother had been 7 months pregnant when she vanished. Ruth felt the air leave her lungs. She shouldn't be here. She shouldn't be here now. A sudden movement in the doorway made her spin. Earl Hensley stood framed against the fading daylight from the outer room, his silhouette an imposing, almost menacing shadow. "Jesus," Ruth whispered, her hand flying to her chest. "You scared me." "Good," Earl grunted, stepping fully into the hidden room, his eyes studiously avoiding the rows of dolls. "Should be scared." He pulled a flask from his pocket, taking a long, unhurried swig. "Followed you out here. Figured you wouldn't listen. Never do. You types looking for family." "You knew about this room," Ruth accused, a sudden surge of anger cutting through her fear. "Helped build it," Earl admitted, his voice hollow. 1967. Vernon said it was for valuables, keeping important things safe. His laugh was a bitter, rattling sound. "Didn't know he meant the children's things. Didn't know about any of it until after." "After what?" Ruth pressed, her gaze locked on his. "What happened that night?"
Earl took another long pull from his flask, the liquid gurgling audibly. December 15th, 1968. I was supposed to work, but Vernon gave me the night off. Paid holiday, he said. First one ever. Should have known something was wrong. He moved slowly along the shelves, his calloused fingers hovering inches from the silent dolls, but never quite touching. Next morning I come in, everyone's gone. Vernon's there with Sheriff Pike. Says there was an emergency relocation. Gas leak in the heating system. Had to move the children quick, middle of the night, for their safety. And you believed that? Ruth's voice was sharp with disbelief. What choice did I have? Earl's shoulders slumped. Sheriff backed him up. Vernon owned the orphanage, owned half the town, and the children were already gone. His voice cracked, brittle with a pain that had festered for decades. But then I found Annette, crying behind the kitchen. Ruth's mind flashed back to the online photograph, the smiling young woman among the children. Annette Briggs, she breathed. Sweetest girl, Earl confirmed, a ghost of a smile touching his lips before vanishing. Loved those kids like they were hers. Vernon had sent her home that night, told her mother was sick, needed her. Wasn't true. Her mother was fine. When Annette came back the next morning, found the place empty. Earl took another long drink, the flask almost empty. She never was the same after. Where is she now? Still around, still under Vernon's thumb. He gave her a job, keeps her close, secretary at his main office. 40 years she's been there, like she's doing penance for something that wasn't her fault.
Ruth held up the ledger, her finger tracing the hastily scrawled entry. "This says Special Placement Initiative. What does that mean?" "Means Vernon found a way to make money off those kids one last time." Earl's face twisted into a mask of disgust. "You gotta understand, Willowbrook wasn't state-funded. Vernon ran it like a private business, taking in unwanted kids, collecting donations, finding families to adopt. But by '68, donations were drying up. State was asking questions about conditions, credentials. So he sold them." He spat the words, venomous. "Can't prove it, but yeah, that's what I think." Earl pointed a trembling finger at the dolls. Annette made these. Vernon told her it was for Christmas, a nice gesture. Let each child put their special thing inside for safekeeping while they went to meet their new families. Temporary. He said they'd come back after Christmas to collect them if the adoptions went through. But they never came back. No record of them anywhere. I checked over the years. No death certificates, no adoption records, like they just stopped existing. Earl's eyes finally met hers, a raw, desperate plea in their depths.
"Your mother, Grace," he said, his voice softer, heavy with unspoken regret. "I remember her. Quiet girl. Scared. Pregnant and trying to hide it under loose dresses. Vernon was furious when he found out. Why? Because pregnant girls were complicated. Couldn't place them easy. Had to wait until after the baby. Then you got two problems instead of one." Earl paused, a chilling implication hanging in the air. "Unless someone wanted both, mother and baby. Package deal." Ruth felt a wave of nausea. "Someone bought my pregnant mother?" "Don't know for sure," Earl admitted, his gaze falling to the floor. "But December 15th, she was here. December 16th, she wasn't. Math isn't hard." Ruth turned back to the silent, accusing rows of dolls. Which one was hers? Earl scanned the shelves, his eyes narrowed in concentration. He pointed to a small cloth doll in a faded yellow dress. "Third shelf, near the back. That one. Remember Annette making it special? Said Grace liked yellow."
With trembling hands, Ruth lifted it. It was heavier than the others, a profound weight that felt like history itself. Inside, she found a small, tarnished hospital bracelet. Grace Caldwell, admitted March 3rd, 1968. And something else. A tiny ultrasound photo, grainy and faded yet impossibly clear. The first picture of herself, taken before she was born. The note read, "Grace C., age 15. Baby picture." She wanted to keep it to show her child someday. Ruth's legs gave out beneath her. She sank hard under the dusty floor, clutching the ultrasound to her chest, tears blurring her vision. Her mother had wanted her, had saved her first picture, believing she would one day show it to her child. "40 years I've been trying to forget," Earl said quietly, his voice thick with a lifetime of buried guilt. "Vernon threatened me, said if I ever talked he'd make sure people knew I helped, said he had documents with my signature. And maybe I did help, building this room, looking the other way. But I swear I didn't know, not until after." "We have to go to the police," Ruth insisted, her voice raw but firm. "With what? Dolls and old papers?" Earl's laugh was bitter, devoid of humor. "Vernon Whitmore owns the police, owns the judges, owns most of the county." He shook his head. "Besides, he'll say it was all legal, emergency placement, acting in the children's best interest. And who's going to contradict him? The children are gone. The treasures in these dolls, they prove the kids existed, don't prove what happened to them." Earl moved towards the door, his silhouette once again framed by the dying light. "You want my advice? Take your mother's things and go home. You know she wanted you. That's more than most get." "I can't just leave this," Ruth whispered, her voice fierce with a newfound purpose.
"Then you're a fool." Earl stopped at the doorway, his words like a cold blade. "Vernon Whitmore destroyed 43 children and built an empire on it. You think he'll hesitate to destroy you?" He paused, then offered a final, grudging piece of counsel. "But if you're determined to dig, talk to Annette. She knows more than she's ever said. Just be careful. Vernon keeps her on a short leash for a reason." After Earl left, the silence in the hidden room deepened, filled only by the whisper of dust motes dancing in the beam of Ruth's flashlight. She continued her grim task, documenting every doll, every tiny treasure, every name. The twin dolls, each holding matching halves of a tarnished locket. The oldest child's doll, containing a set of worn car keys. He'd been just weeks from aging out, from freedom. The youngest, barely 3 years old, had left a stuffed mouse, its single, button eye staring blankly into the past. By the time she finished, darkness had fallen completely, thick and impenetrable, both outside and within the orphanage. Her phone battery blinked ominously, near death, but she had it all. Evidence. Proof that 43 children had existed, had been told they were coming back, had trusted enough to leave their most precious possessions behind. Tomorrow, she would find Annette Briggs.
Echoes in print, shadows in steel. The Millbrook Public Library opened its doors precisely at 9 o'clock. Ruth, however, had been waiting since 8:30, her laptop bag slung over her shoulder, the Willowbrook ledger tucked securely inside. She'd spent the night at a nondescript motel 20 miles away, doors double-locked, curtains tightly drawn, meticulously uploading every photograph to 3 separate cloud services, a digital fortress against a truth too dangerous to lose. The librarian, a woman in her 70s with a halo of silver hair pinned in a neat bun, offered a gentle smile as she unlocked the door. "Early researcher, my favorite kind. I'm Martha." "Ruth," she replied, a faint smile touching her lips. "I'm looking for newspaper archives from 1968. Martha's smile flickered, a momentary ripple across a calm surface. "Willowbrook." It wasn't a question. Ruth nodded, a weariness seeping into her bones. "Third person this year, though the other 2 were teenagers, urban explorer types." Martha led her to a back room, to the humming glow of microfilm readers. 1968's a popular year for that particular tragedy. Her gaze was knowing, compassionate. "You remember it?" "I was 28, working at the elementary school." Martha pulled out several dusty boxes of microfilm. "December 16th, 1968. Woke up to sirens everywhere. Sheriff's cars, state police, even some federal vehicles, all headed out Route 47. She loaded the first reel with practiced ease. But by afternoon, they were gone. Sheriff Pike held a press conference, said there had been a gas leak, children evacuated safely to other facilities, case closed."
Ruth scrolled through the December issues, her fingers flying across the reader. On December 17th, there it was, a front-page headline, stark and uninformative. "Willowbrook Orphanage closes. Children safely relocated after gas emergency." The accompanying article was brief, sterile. It quoted Sheriff Pike, praising the swift action that transferred all children to appropriate facilities throughout the state. It quoted Vernon Whitmore, expressing deep gratitude for the swift action that saved young lives. No follow-up articles, no questions asked, just a blank official silence. "That's it?" Ruth asked, disbelief coloring her voice. "No one investigated further?" "Vernon Whitmore owned the newspaper," Martha explained, her voice dropping to a near whisper as she glanced towards the library's main entrance. "Still does." She leaned closer, her silver hair shimmering under the dim light. "But I saw the trucks that night." "What trucks?" "I lived out near Route 47 back then." Martha twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit. "That night, December 15th, around midnight, I heard engines. Looked out my window. 3 moving trucks, 2 vans,
all headed toward Willowbrook. Then about an hour later, they came back, drove right past my house, heading different directions, north, south, east. "You're sure about the time?" Ruth asked, her recorder already capturing Martha's words. "Positive. I was up with my baby. Colicky thing, never slept. I watched those vehicles split up at the intersection like they didn't want to be seen together." "Did you tell anyone?" "Told Sheriff Pike. He said I was mistaken. Said the evacuation happened December 16th morning, not the night before. Said I should focus on my baby and stop spreading rumors." Martha's jaw tightened, a flash of old anger in her eyes. "A week later, my husband got promoted at the factory. Big raise. Vernon Whitmore owned that factory."
Ruth continued her search, scanning for any mention of individual children. Nothing. But in the January 3rd, 1969 edition, she found something else. A small, unassuming item in the business section. Whitmore Enterprises expands. Local businessman acquires 3 car dealerships. January 1969. Weeks after the children of Willowbrook vanished, Vernon Whitmore's empire began its ascent. She photographed everything, then turned her attention to Vernon Whitmore in current records. The results flooded the screens. Whitmore Motors with 6 sprawling locations. Whitmore Real Estate. Whitmore Development Group. Pictures of him at charity galas, hospital dedications, church groundbreakings. Always tall, silver-haired, impeccably distinguished, smiling broadly with senators and governors. In almost every recent photograph, the same woman stood slightly behind him. 50-ish, brown hair streaked with gray, always in conservative suits, always holding his schedule or a stack of files. The caption on one photo identified her. Vernon Whitmore, with longtime assistant, Annette Briggs. Annette. Still there. Still close. Ruth found the address for Whitmore Enterprises headquarters, a modern building on Main Street, all glass and steel, gleaming coldly in the afternoon sun. She drove past slowly, Vernon's gleaming Mercedes visible in its reserved spot. Through the ground-floor windows, she could see a reception area, a woman seated at a sleek, minimalist desk. Annette. She looked older than her 59 years, her shoulders curved inward as if constantly bracing herself against unseen blows. But when she smiled at someone entering, Ruth saw a fleeting flash of the young woman from the old photograph, the one who had loved those children with a fierce maternal devotion. Ruth parked, took a deep breath, and walked in. "May I help you?" Annette's voice was soft, carefully modulated, an echo of a politeness honed over decades. "I hope so," Ruth replied, stepping further into the hushed, air-conditioned lobby. "I'm Ruth Caldwell. I'm researching the history of Willowbrook Orphanage for a book." Annette's face drained of color, turning to alabaster. Her hand flew to her throat, fingers finding a small cross pendant, clutching it like a lifeline. That was so long ago." "You worked there, didn't you?" Ruth pressed gently, her gaze unwavering. "In 1968? I should get Mr. Whitmore." Annette began to rise, her movements stiff with alarm. "No." Ruth leaned forward, her voice urgent but low. "Please, just 5 minutes. My mother was there. Grace Caldwell. 15, pregnant. You might have known her." Annette's eyes darted frantically to Vernon's office door, then back to Ruth, a hunted look in their depths. "I can't. I'm sorry. I don't remember anything about—" "You made dolls for the children for Christmas, to hold their special things." Annette's breath hitched, a strangled gasp. A single tear bright and startling, slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. "How do you—" "I found them," Ruth finished, her voice a soft, devastating blow. "The room. All 43 dolls. Oh, God. They're still there. The children's things are still there." Her voice cracked with grief and wonder. "Everyone. Tommy's St. Christopher medal. Alice's mother's ring. Mary Catherine's Bible." Ruth pulled out her phone, showing Annette the photos, each image a silent testament. "You made these, didn't you?" Annette stared at the screen, tears now flowing freely, unchecked. "Mr. Whitmore said it was for Christmas, said the children were going to preview families, like a trial adoption just for the holidays. They'd leave their precious things for safekeeping, come back if it didn't work out." Her voice broke. "But they didn't come back. He sent me away that night, said my mother was sick. When I got home, she was fine, didn't know what I was talking about. I rushed back the next morning, but—" Annette's voice dissolved into a choked sob. "Everyone was gone, every child, even the babies." "What did Vernon tell you?" "Emergency evacuation, gas leak, children sent to other facilities for safety, but I knew their things were still in that room. I asked when they'd come back for them." Her eyes, wide and haunted, met Ruth's. "He said they wouldn't need them anymore, said their new families would buy them better things." Footsteps on the grand staircase. Annette's eyes flashed with terror. She wiped her face quickly, struggling to compose herself, to rearrange the carefully constructed mask of a dutiful assistant. "You have to go! If he finds you here—" Vernon Whitmore descended the stairs like he owned the air itself. Tall, immaculate, in a perfectly tailored suit, his eyes missed nothing. They swept over Ruth, then lingered on Annette's tear-stained face. "Annette," he purred, his voice smooth as silk, yet edged with steel. "Is this woman bothering you?" "No, Mr. Whitmore," Annette stammered, her voice thin and reedy. "She was just asking about historical records for a book."
Vernon's smile didn't reach his eyes. "How interesting. And you are Ruth Caldwell." He tasted the name, a slow, predatory assessment. "Caldwell. That's familiar. Have we met?" "I don't think so," Ruth replied, meeting his gaze directly, refusing to flinch. He studied her with the intense, calculating gaze of a man cataloging potential threats. "Well, I'm afraid Annette has work to do. If you need historical information, the library has excellent archives." "Of course," Ruth said, forcing herself to maintain a calm facade. "Thank you for your time." She turned to leave. "Miss Caldwell," Vernon's voice, now sharper, stopped her. "A word of advice for your book. Sometimes the past is better left undisturbed. Old buildings can be dangerous. Floors collapse, walls fall. Accidents happen to people who aren't careful. The threat, wrapped in silk, was undeniably sharp." Ruth met her chilling gaze. "I'm very careful." "Good." Vernon turned to Annette, the smile gone. "Annette, cancel my lunch. I need to make some calls." Outside, Ruth's hands shook as she started her car. In the rearview mirror, she saw Vernon Whitmore standing at the panoramic window, phone pressed to his ear, watching her drive away, a predator observing his prey. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She answered on speaker. "Don't come back here." Annette's whispered voice, laced with terror, broke through the static. "He knows who you are, knows about Grace. He keeps records of all the children, even after." The line went dead. Ruth drove straight to the library, found Martha, who was now shelving books. "I need everything you have on Vernon Whitmore.
Business records, property transfers, anything from 1969 onward. Martha pulled out box after box, her face etched with concern. "You're rattling cages, aren't you? Be careful." Her voice dropped even lower. "The last person who investigated Vernon too closely had a car accident. Brake lines failed on a straight stretch of road." Ruth spent hours documenting Vernon's inexorable rise, tracing the dark threads of his empire. The price of innocence. January 1969. 3 car dealerships. March 1969. Apartment buildings. June 1969. A sprawling shopping center. Each acquisition, meticulously documented in the library's archives, was paid in cash. No loans, no visible investors. Yet, in one obscure filing, perhaps a lawyer's oversight, lay a list. Initial investors in Whitmore Enterprises. 43 names, unfamiliar surnames scattered across 5 states. But it was the amounts that were chillingly specific, unusually precise. $8,000 for a Randall family investment, $12,000 for a Morrison contribution, $15,000 for an unnamed investor in Baltimore. And then, standing out with stark clarity, $25,000 for a CF family special circumstances. 43 investments. 43 vanished children. These were the prices, the cold, brutal sums paid for human lives. The CF family special circumstances? Grace Caldwell, 15 and pregnant. Sold for $25,000. Ruth photographed every page, every damning entry. The evidence, though circumstantial, was an indictment. Vernon Whitmore had sold those children, every last one, and used their stolen futures to forge his empire. And somewhere, Annette had said, he still kept the original files on all of them. Ruth had to find those files. She sat in her motel room, laptop open, cross-referencing the investor names with National Missing Children databases. Nothing. These children had been erased so thoroughly, so meticulously, it was as if they had never existed. A soft knock at the door made her freeze. Too soft for housekeeping, too late for delivery. "Miss Caldwell, it's Annette. Please." The whispered plea was almost lost to the motel room's sterile silence. Ruth checked the peephole. Annette stood alone in the cold night air, hugging herself, her head darting nervously over her shoulder every few seconds. Ruth unlatched the door, pulling the trembling woman inside. "How did you find me?" "Vernon had you followed," Annette explained, her voice a thin, reedy whisper, barely audible above her own shallow breaths. "But his man is watching from the parking lot. Doesn't know I came up." Annette was shaking uncontrollably, a tremor that ran through her entire body. "I can't do this anymore. 40 years of knowing and saying nothing." Ruth guided her to a worn armchair, poured water from the nightstand pitcher. "Tell me what happened." "You don't understand what he is, what he's capable of." Annette fumbled in her purse, pulling out a small flask, adding a generous splash to the water. Her hands steadied slightly as she took a long, fortifying gulp. "After the children disappeared, I tried to go to the state police. Vernon found out."
Her eyes wide and haunted met Ruth's. "He had me committed to Riverside Psychiatric. Said I was having delusions from trauma. He had you institutionalized. 3 months. They gave me so many drugs I couldn't remember my own name." A bitter, mirthless laugh escaped Annette's lips. "When Vernon finally had me released, he offered me a job. Said it was the only one I'd ever get with a psychiatric commitment on my record. 40 years. 40 years every day sitting outside his office. Every day remembering those children's faces." Ruth turned her laptop, showing Annette the screen filled with photographs of the dolls. "These dolls you made. Tell me about them." Annette touched the screen gently, reverently, as if caressing the children themselves. December 14th. Vernon called me into his office, said we were playing Santa. The children were going to special Christmas placements, trial adoptions with wealthy families. But they were scared, so we'd tell them it was just a visit. She pointed to a doll on the screen. Timothy was so proud of that medal, said his papa gave it to him before he died. Wouldn't ever take it off even for baths. But Vernon said it looked low class. Said the families wouldn't want children wearing cheap jewelry. So I told Timothy we'd keep it safe in a special doll just for him. Her voice cracked, thick with the memory of her own complicity born of fear and manipulation. All 43 children left something. Vernon insisted, said it was important they felt they were coming back. Tears streamed down her face. I spent all day December 15th making those dolls with the children. They were so excited, thought they were going to have real Christmases with real families. Temporary, they kept saying, just to try it out. "What happened that night?" Ruth asked, her voice hushed. "Vernon sent me home at 5. Said my mother had called, was having chest pains. But when I got home, she was making dinner, completely fine. I tried to call the orphanage, but the line was busy. Tried to go back, but the roads were blocked. Sheriff's cars everywhere, saying there was a gas leak." Annette pulled out a yellowed envelope, her hands trembling as she held it. "Next morning, I went back. Everyone was gone. Vernon was there with Sheriff Pike, telling me about the emergency evacuation, but I knew it was a lie." She opened the envelope, pulling out a small black and white photograph, fragile with age. "I took this December 15th, right before I left." It was a blurred image of the children at dinner, all 43 faces visible, a testament to life just hours before their disappearance. A timestamp from the orphanage's clock on the wall read December 15th, 5:47 p.m. "Vernon said the evacuation was December 16th at dawn," Annette continued, her voice gaining a desperate strength. "But I knew they left that night. Those trucks Martha saw, I heard them too, from my mother's house. Vernon just didn't know we could hear them from that far." Ruth studied the photograph, a crucial piece of evidence that shredded Vernon's carefully constructed lie. "Do you know where the children went?" "Some of it." Annette reached into her purse again, pulling out a small notebook. "Over the years, working for Vernon, I've seen things, filed things." She opened it. Pages of careful notes filled with tiny, meticulous handwriting. 1975, Annette began, her finger tracing a line. "Vernon gets a Christmas card from the Morrison family in Boston. No return address, but the postmark. I looked it up. Expensive neighborhood, the kind that wouldn't normally send him cards. 1983, phone call from someone named Randall. Vernon went white. Took it in his office. I heard him say that wasn't part of our agreement. 1991. Annette's voice grew urgent. A woman came in, said her name was Alice Henderson, not Henley. Vernon had me escorted out before they talked, but I saw her face. She had the same eyes as little Alice from the orphanage.
Ruth's pulse quickened, a dizzying rush of revelation. Alice Henley, Earl's relative, his niece. Her parents died in the fire, 1963. Earl brought her to Willowbrook because he couldn't care for her, visited every Sunday until... Annette swallowed hard, the word unspoken. Until she was gone. You think this woman was that Alice? I know she was, Annette affirmed, her voice filled with a chilling certainty. Because after she left, Vernon was rattled, had me pull all the old Willowbrook files from storage, spent 3 days going through them, then had them moved to his home office, said they were too sensitive for the business. The files still exist, in his home, a safe in his study. I've seen it when I've had to bring him documents there. Climate-controlled, fireproof. He calls it his insurance policy. Ruth grabbed Annette's hands, her gaze fierce. We need those files. You can't get them. His house is a fortress. Security system, cameras, guards. And even if you could, he's always there. Especially now that he knows you're asking questions. When does he leave? Thursdays. Golf at the country club. 9 to noon, like clockwork. This Thursday. Ruth's mind raced, a plan already forming. You're not listening, Annette whispered, fear returning to her eyes. Even when he's gone, there's security. The safe requires his fingerprint and a code. I don't know either. But you know the house, Ruth countered, her voice firm. The layout. Annette pulled her hands away, shrinking back into the chair. No, I can't. If he found out... He's kept you prisoner for 40 years, Ruth said, her voice hardening, cutting through Annette's fear. Made you complicit in whatever happened to those children. Don't you want to know? Really know what happened to Timothy with his medal? To little Alice? To my mother? Of course I want to know, Annette cried, fresh tears streaming down her face. It's all I think about. Their faces, their voices. Mary Catherine asking if her new family would let her go to church. Tommy worried his St. Christopher wouldn't protect him if he left it behind. She buried her face in her hands. But I'm scared. I've been scared for so long. I don't remember what it feels like not to be. Ruth pulled up the photo of Grace's doll on her phone, the faded ultrasound picture glowing faintly on the screen. My mother was 15, pregnant, alone, and she still saved this ultrasound picture to show her baby someday. She had hope, even in that place. Don't we owe her the truth? Don't we owe all of them?
Annette stared at the image for a long, agonizing moment. Then, slowly, she raised her head, a fragile flicker of defiance in her eyes. Thursday, he leaves at 8:45 sharp. The house staff takes a break from 9 to 10. He doesn't like them working when he's not there to supervise. She leaned forward, her voice low and urgent. There's a service entrance in the back. The code is his birthday backwards. 5291. The safe? Ruth prompted, her breath caught in her throat. His office, behind the portrait of his father. Annette pulled out her own phone, showed Ruth a shaky video. It was footage of Vernon opening the safe, taken from a doorway, subtly. I recorded this last month, thought maybe someday. I don't know what I thought. Ruth studied the video intently. Vernon's thumb on the scanner, then a 6-digit code. The angle made it hard to see exactly, but the pattern of his finger movements, the rhythm of his touch, was visible. Annette, this is enough. We can... There's more. Annette's voice dropped to a whisper, cold with a new kind of dread. The files aren't the only evidence. There's a woman in Cedar Falls, lives in a big house, never goes out. Vernon visits her once a month, has for 20 years. Who is she? I don't know, but he brings her money, cash, and once I heard him on the phone after visiting her. He said, she's getting worse, remembering things, might need to increase her medication. Ruth's blood went cold. You think she's one of the children, or someone who knows what happened?
The house is in Vernon's name, but the bills go to a trust, the Willowbrook Foundation. Annette stood to leave, her resolve solidifying. I've told you everything I know. Thursday morning, you'll have maybe 20 minutes before the staff comes back. Don't waste them. At the door, Annette paused, turning back. That photo you showed me, all the children at dinner, I know their faces by heart, every name, every story. If you find the truth, will you— Her voice broke, a raw, desperate plea. Will you tell me, even if it's horrible? I promise. Ruth met her gaze, a silent vow passing between them. Annette nodded, a flicker of something akin to peace in her eyes, then slipped out. Through the window, Ruth watched her drive away. In the parking lot, a dark sedan started its engine, following Annette's car into the night. Ruth pulled out her phone, called the one person she trusted implicitly. Maggie? Maggie's voice, worried, answered from the other end. It's late. Are you okay? I'm fine, sweetheart, Ruth replied, her voice firm, unwavering, but I need you to do something for me.
The reckoning and the reunion. Upload those files I sent you to that journalist friend of yours, Ruth instructed, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The one who did the corruption story on the governor. Tell her not to publish yet, but to be ready. Mom, you're scaring me, Maggie's voice came through the phone, thick with worry. Just as insurance, baby. I'll be home soon. After hanging up, Ruth returned to the video of Vernon at his safe. The thumb placement, the intricate code pattern. She played it frame by frame, meticulously mapping his finger movements, imprinting them onto her mind. Thursday. 3 days away. 3 days to plan how to break into the fortified home of the most powerful man in 3 counties and steal the evidence of a 40-year-old crime. She looked at the photo of the children at their last dinner, faces bright with hope for families that would love them. 3 days.
Ruth spent Tuesday submerged in the county records office, tracing property transfers from 1969. Every cash purchase Vernon made that year, each transaction led back to different banks, different cities, Boston, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Richmond, Atlanta, the very cities where Martha had seen the trucks heading that fateful night. The amounts were specific, unsettlingly odd. $8,000 here, $12,000 there. Not round numbers, not like normal investments, but more like prices negotiated for individual items, or individual children. Her phone rang, an unknown number. Miss Caldwell, this is Richard Morrison from Boston. I think you've been looking for information about Willowbrook. Ruth's breath caught. Morrison, one of the names from the investor list. Who gave you my number? Martha, at the library. She thought we should talk. A long, pregnant pause stretched between them. I was adopted in 1968. December 16th, actually. My parents always said they got me through a private arrangement. Paid cash, no agency. Mr. Morrison, please just listen. I'm 47 years old, Richard cut in, his voice raw. All my life, something felt wrong. No birth certificate, just an amended one. No adoption papers. When my adoptive father was dying last year, dementia, he kept apologizing. Said they bought me. Actually used that word. Bought. Ruth gripped the phone tighter, her knuckles white. Did he say from whom?
A man named Whitmore. Said he had more kids if we wanted them later. Premium quality. He called us like we were livestock. Richard's voice was laced with a bitter fury. I've spent a year trying to trace where I came from. Then Martha called today, said you were investigating Willowbrook. Can we meet? I'm driving down tomorrow, but, Miss Caldwell, I'm not the only one. I hired a private investigator, found 2 others. Same story. Adopted December 1968. No papers, parents paid cash. We're all from the same place, aren't we? Willowbrook? I think so. Yes. How many? 43 children disappeared that night. Silence. Then a whispered, Jesus Christ! 43! After Richard hung up, Ruth drove to Cedar Falls, searching for the house Annette had mentioned. She found it on the north side, a grand Victorian cloaked behind high walls, its curtains always drawn. The mailbox bore no name, just a number. She parked down the street, watched. At 4 o'clock, a nurse in scrubs arrived, unlocking the front door with a key. At 8 o'clock, the night shift nurse arrived and the first nurse left. Someone needed round-the-clock care. Wednesday morning, Ruth visited the Cedar Falls County Clerk. The house was owned by the Willowbrook Foundation. Taxes paid automatically from a trust. The trust documents were public record. One beneficiary listed Patient W23. W23. Willowbrook. Child 23. She checked the ledger photos on her phone. Child 23 in the admission order was Grace Caldwell, her mother. Ruth's legs nearly gave out. She sank onto the courthouse steps, fighting for breath, the world spinning around her. Her mother was alive. Had been alive all these years, just 10 miles away, living under Vernon Whitmore's control. That evening, she met Richard Morrison at the motel. He was tall, graying at the temples, with the kind of careful posture that came from expensive schools and a lifetime of self-control. "This is what my father left me," he said, handing her a folder. Bank records from 1968. December 18th, he withdrew $12,000 cash. December 20th, that deposit started his business, construction equipment, property purchases. He built his fortune on that money, the price of a child, the price of me. Richard's jaw clenched, a muscle throbbing. "There's more. My DNA test last year, I got a match. Half-sister living in Virginia, Lisa Randall Park, adopted the same week as me. Have you contacted her? We've been talking for months. She remembers Willowbrook. Not much. She was only 6, but she remembers the dolls. Said she had to put her father's war medal in one for safekeeping." Ruth showed him the photos from her phone. Found the doll with the medal. This one. Richard stared at the screen, his breath catching. That's it. That's exactly what she described. Purple Heart from Korea. His voice broke, thick with emotion. Her biological father was a war hero who died, and she had to leave his medal behind in a doll. They told them they'd come back for their things, but they never did, because Vernon sold us. Richard pulled out another document. I found this in my father's papers. A receipt, sort of. Not official, but it was handwritten on Willowbrook Orphanage letterhead. Received December 16th, 1968. Placement fee for one male child, age 9, good health, high intelligence. No returns, no questions, VW. Vernon's initials. This is evidence, Ruth said, her voice filled with a surging hope. Actual proof of trafficking. It's proof he took money, Richard corrected. His gaze hardened. Not proof of what happened to the others. He leaned forward, intensity burning in his eyes.
Lisa and I want to help. We've been searching for others. Found a woman in Maryland who thinks she might be from Willowbrook, but she was so young, only 3. Doesn't remember anything except a room full of dolls that scared her." Ruth's phone buzzed. Annette. A text from a number she didn't recognize. "He knows about Boston man visiting. Moved to the golf game to Friday. Tomorrow, no good." Then immediately after, another message. "Wait, no. Emergency board meeting New York City tomorrow. He's leaving tonight. Flying back Friday morning. GONOW." Ruth looked at Richard, a new urgency in her eyes. "Change of plans. Vernon's leaving town tonight. This might be our only chance." "Chance for what?" "To get into his house. Find the files. Find proof of what happened to all 43 children." Richard didn't hesitate. "I'm coming with you. It's breaking and entering. It's finding out who I really am, and making the bastard who sold me pay for it."
The Fortress and the Truth. They drove both cars to Vernon's opulent neighborhood, parking streets away. The house loomed, a dark, silent fortress, save for the security lights that cast stark patterns across its immaculate grounds. Ruth had watched enough to know the patterns. A camera at the front door, another at the garage. But the service entrance Annette had mentioned had only a motion light, an oversight in Vernon's otherwise impenetrable defenses. Ruth approached the back door. Her fingers, steady despite the pounding of her heart, typed the code, 5291. The lock clicked open. Inside was a mudroom, leading into a kitchen vast enough to serve a restaurant. They moved carefully, phone flashlights pointed down, their beams carving paths through the oppressive darkness. The study was exactly where Annette had described, west wing, second door. Vernon's father, a stern, unsmiling man, glared down from an oil painting above the fireplace. Behind it, the safe. "State-of-the-art biometric lock, fingerprint scanner," Richard muttered, his voice grim. "We're screwed." But Ruth had come prepared. She pulled out a small kit she'd bought from a suspicious but well-paid computer store clerk. Graphite powder, tape, a gelatin sheet. Vernon's fingerprint would be all over his office. She dusted the desk drawer, found a perfect latent print, lifted it with the tape, and carefully transferred it to the gelatin. The scanner was sophisticated, but not impossible to fool.
The gelatin thumb worked. A soft whir, a green light. Now the code. Ruth pulled up Annette's shaky video, watching Vernon's finger movements frame by frame. The first digit was definitely 1. The second could be 2 or 5. She mapped each possibility, her mind racing. Richard, standing guard, recorded on his phone. 4th try. 1, 5, 6, 8, 4, 3. The safe door swung open with a faint click. Inside, hundreds of files, meticulously organized, each labeled with a name and a number. Ruth grabbed them, passing stacks to Richard, who photographed pages with mechanical efficiency, a silent whirring sound filling the hushed study. W1 through W43, 43 children, each with a detailed file. Photos, medical records, personality assessments, and, most crucially, placement records. Where each child went, who paid how much. Tommy Randall, W7, $8,000, Boston, Massachusetts, placed with Randall family. Alice Henley, W15, $10,000, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Henderson family. James Morrison, W18, Boston, Massachusetts, Morrison family. And there, near the bottom, in an entry that made Ruth's breath catch in her throat, Grace Caldwell, W23, $25,000, special circumstances, mother and unborn child package, Baltimore. Initially relocated 1988 to Cedar Falls. Monthly maintenance payments
Status: permanent residential care. Ruth's hand shook violently. Her mother was alive. Had been alive all these years, just 10 miles away.
"There's more," Richard said, pulling out a small, leather-bound journal from the safe's bottom compartment. Vernon's personal record, handwritten. December 15th, 1968. Final solution implemented. Sheriff Pike handled beautifully. 3 trucks, 2 vans, 5 drivers. Children distributed across state lines within 6 hours. Adoption fees collected in cash, untraceable. Total profit, $445,000. They photographed every page. Lists of families who bought children, payment schedules, and worse. Notes about children who were difficult to place. W31, behavioral issues, sent to Marshfield Institute for medical trials. W38, W39, twins, developmental delays, sold to Blackwood Research. Not all the children went to families. Some were sold to institutions, research facilities, places that needed test subjects. A car door slammed outside. They froze. Footsteps on the front porch. A key turning in the lock. Ruth grabbed the most important files: Grace's, the payment records, the journal. Richard took quick photos of the open safe, the remaining files still inside. Vernon's voice, sharp with irritation, carried from the entrance. Flight was canceled. Damn weather in New York. They slipped out the service door just as Vernon entered his study. Ruth heard his roar of pure, unadulterated rage as they reached their cars. Her phone exploded with calls from unknown numbers as they sped away. She didn't answer. They had the evidence. Names, addresses, amounts. Proved that Vernon Whitmore had trafficked 43 children and built an empire on their sale. And they had the address where her mother had been kept for 20 years.
Confrontation and hope. Ruth's motel room door rattled under heavy knocking at 3:00 a.m. "Miss Caldwell, Vernon Whitmore, we need to talk." She checked the peephole. Vernon stood there, no longer the polished businessman. His silver hair was disheveled, his tie loose, his rage barely contained, pulsing beneath the surface. Behind him, 2 large, anonymous men she didn't recognize. "I've already called the police," Ruth lied, her voice surprisingly steady. "No, you haven't," Vernon countered, his voice calm, dangerously reasonable, the tone of a man used to getting precisely what he wanted. "Because you know they work for me. Open the door, or my associates will open it for you." Ruth grabbed her phone, started recording. "What do you want?" "You took things from my home. Private documents. I want them back." "I don't know what you're talking about." "The woman you were with at my house, Annette, she's already confessed, told me everything about your mother, Grace, about your pathetic search for truth." He leaned closer to the door, his voice dropping to a chilling whisper. "Did you know your mother's been asking for you all these years? Calling for the baby she thinks died?" Ruth's chest tightened, a vice clamping around her heart. "You told her I died."
Easier that way. Pregnancy psychosis, the doctors called it, believing in a baby that never existed. The medication helps, mostly. Vernon's voice turned pleasant, conversational, an unsettling contrast to his words. "She's fragile, your mother. One shock, one disruption to her routine, and who knows what might happen. The mind is such a delicate thing." "You're threatening her." "I'm explaining reality. Your mother requires specialized care, expensive care. I've provided that for 40 years, but funding could be reconsidered." Ruth opened the door, but kept the chain on, a thin barrier between them. "Those children, you sold them." "I found them homes." Vernon's eyes were flat, reptilian.
devoid of any genuine emotion. They were unwanted, forgotten, heading for state institutions. I gave them families who desperately wanted children, families with means to provide good lives. You trafficked them, sold them like property. I saved them." His face, twisted in a grotesque parody of benevolence, hardened. "Do you know what happened to orphanage children in the 60s? Aged out at 16, thrown onto the streets? Half ended up in prison or dead within 5 years. I gave them futures. What about the ones who went to research facilities? MW31 to Marshfield Institute. The twins to Blackwood Research." Vernon's composure cracked, a fleeting flicker of alarm in his eyes. "How did you—" He caught himself, regaining his icy control. "Some children were difficult to place. Special needs, behavioral issues. The facilities provided care they couldn't get elsewhere. Medical experiments. You sold children from medical experiments."
Prove it. Vernon smiled now, cold and certain. 40-year-old accusations from stolen documents. My lawyers will destroy you. But I'm reasonable. Return what you took. Leave town tonight. And your mother continues getting her care. She lives comfortably, safely, until her natural end. And if I don't, state budget cuts are terrible these days. Facilities closing, patients transferred to cheaper places, rougher places. He stepped back, a predatory glint in his eyes. You have 1 hour to decide. My men will wait outside. After he left, Ruth called Richard. "He's here, threatening my mother." "I've been busy too," Richard replied, his voice calm, resolute. "Posted everything to a friend who runs a journalism blog. It goes live in 6 hours unless I stop it. He has my mother in a facility. If we expose this, we expose it smart." Ruth's mind raced, adrenaline sharpening her focus. "I've got a contact at the FBI, white-collar division. She's very interested in 40-year-old financial crimes that cross state lines." Ruth packed quickly, but her mind was fixed on Cedar Falls. Her mother, just 10 miles away, medicated into forgetting she'd ever had a daughter. She slipped out the bathroom window, leaving her car for Vernon's men to watch. Richard picked her up 2 blocks away. "We need to see her," Ruth said firmly, "my mother, before this breaks wide open. Vernon will have people watching. I don't care." They drove to Cedar Falls as dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold. The Victorian house looked less ominous in the morning light, its high walls softened by the gentle glow. An older woman in nurse's scrubs was unlocking the front door. Ruth approached carefully. "Excuse me, I'm looking for Grace Caldwell." The nurse's eyes widened. "No one ever visits Grace. Are you family?" "I'm her daughter." "But Grace says her baby died. It's part of her delusion. Poor thing." Ruth showed her driver's license. "Ruth Caldwell. Born January 12, 1969. She was told I died, but I didn't."
The nurse looked between Ruth and the license several times, her expression shifting from confusion to dawning wonder. "Oh, my Lord, all these years she's been calling for you, saying her baby was crying somewhere, needing her." Her eyes filled with tears. "Can I see her?" "Mr. Whitmore has strict instructions. Mr. Whitmore is about to be arrested for human trafficking." The nurse hesitated, then stepped aside. "Room 3. She has good days and bad days. Today might be good. She was humming this morning." Ruth climbed the stairs on unsteady legs. The door to room 3 was painted a cheerful yellow, a stark contrast to the lock on the outside. Inside, a woman sat by the window, her back turned, humming something that might have been a lullaby. "Grace?" Streaks of gray threaded through her brown hair. She wore a faded housecoat and slippers. "Grace?" The woman turned slowly. Ruth saw her own eyes looking back at her. The same unusual green, the same almond shape, but these eyes were clouded, medicated, lost. "I'm sorry, Do I know you?" Grace's voice was soft, uncertain, like a fragile leaf caught in a breeze. "I'm Ruth. How do you tell someone their whole life was a lie?" "I'm your daughter." Grace smiled sadly, a heartbreaking echo of distant memory. "That's nice, dear, but my baby died. They told me January 1969. The cord was around her neck. They couldn't save her." Ruth pulled out the ultrasound photo from Grace's doll. "You saved this to show your baby someday." Grace took it with trembling hands, her eyes wide, slowly focusing on the faded image. "Where did you... I put this somewhere safe. In a doll. A yellow doll. Because yellow is happy, and I wanted my baby to be happy." She lifted her gaze to Ruth, a flicker of something long buried, struggling to ignite. "You wanted to show it to me someday. To my baby, but she died. Mr. Whitmore said so. The doctors said so." Grace touched the photo gently, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. "I was 15. Too young to be a mother anyway. That's what they all said." "They lied, Mom." Ruth's voice broke on the word. A lifetime of grief, love, and fury pouring into it. "They lied about everything."
The words hung in the air, a whisper against the decades of silence. "I didn't die. They took me from you and told you I died." Grace's gaze locked onto Ruth, her daughter's face a mirror of a past stolen. A long moment stretched, brittle with unspoken history, before Grace's own features crumpled. "You have my mother's eyes," she choked out, a raw confession. "Green, like spring grass. That's what I was going to name you, Spring. But they said you never took a breath." Ruth's voice, though firm, held a tremor of the pain they both carried. "I took plenty of breaths, got adopted by a family in Ohio, grew up, had a daughter of my own, and came looking for you." Grace shook her head, a phantom ache resurfacing. "They said I was crazy, hearing a baby cry that wasn't there. Gave me pills to make it stop. But I'd still heard you sometimes." Tentatively, a hand reached out, brushing Ruth's cheek. "You're real. I'm real." Then 40 years of unbearable loss compressed into one shattering embrace. Grace wept. Not just tears, but a torrent of grief and relief, as if something within her was breaking and healing all at once. The silent screams of a stolen motherhood found their release. "He visits sometimes," Grace whispered, her voice still hoarse, a ghost of fear in her eyes. "Mr. Whitmore asks if I remember things. When I say yes, he increases my medication. When I say no, he tells me I'm getting better." "What do you remember?" Ruth pressed, her heart aching for the fragments of truth.
December 15th, 1968, Grace recounted, her gaze distant, fixed on a day bathed in terror. "They put us on trucks, said we were going to meet families for Christmas. I was scared because I was so pregnant. Who would want a pregnant 15-year-old? She pulled back slightly, her eyes
those same spring-green eyes sharpening with a sudden, painful clarity as she studied Ruth's face. "They sold us, didn't they? All of us." "Yes," Ruth confirmed, the single word a crushing weight. "Tommy cried for his St. Christopher medal. Alice wanted her mama's ring. They promised we could come back for them." "I found them," Ruth interjected, a cold resolve in her tone. "All the dolls, all their treasures, evidence of what Vernon did." Grace's eyes, dulled by years of drugs, sharpened further. 40 years of forced amnesia battling against a surging tide of truth. "The others, the other children." "Some I've found," Ruth said, listing the names like a prayer. "Richard Morrison in Boston, Lisa Randall in Virginia, others still looking. The twins, Henry and Harold, they had developmental problems. Vernon said they were going to a special hospital." Grace gripped Ruth's hands, her voice barely a breath. "They never went to a hospital, did they?" "No," Ruth whispered, the word heavy with sorrow. "A research facility. I'm sorry." Grace nodded slowly, a profound, agonizing understanding dawning. "I knew. Part of me always knew." She looked around the room, her gilded cage for 20 years. What happens now? Just then, Ruth's phone buzzed, a jarring intrusion into their intimate agony. It was Richard. "FBI is here," he reported, his voice tight with urgency. "Vernon has been arrested. It's on the news."
Ruth showed Grace the screen. Vernon Whitmore, his face a mask of fury, being led away in handcuffs. His empire, built on the stolen lives of children, crumbling in real time. "You're free," Ruth told her mother, her voice thick with emotion. "We're both free." But Grace was looking out the window at a world she hadn't been part of for 40 years. A deep, heartbreaking sigh escaped her lips. "I don't know how to be free anymore. He took that too, didn't he? Along with everything else." Outside, the distant wail of sirens grew louder. Vernon's private security, pulled away to deal with the federal agents at his sprawling estate, were gone from the motel. The nurse, oblivious to the seismic shift in Grace's world, appeared in the doorway. "There are police here and reporters asking about the Willowbrook children." Ruth met her mother's gaze, a silent question passing between them. Ready to tell the truth? Grace stood slowly, drawing herself up, still clutching the faded ultrasound photo of her lost child. A flicker of something akin to fierce determination ignited in her eyes. "I've been ready for 40 years.
Meanwhile, in Vernon's opulent home office, Annette Briggs moved with mechanical precision, shredding documents. 20 minutes. That was all she had before the FBI arrived with a warrant. 20 minutes to obliterate 40 years of complicity, of choices she could never unmake. Then her movements faltered. In her hand was a file she'd never seen before. W31, David Marsh, Behavioral Concerns, transferred to Marshfield Institute, monthly payments received until 1973, subject deceased, medical complications. A 5-year-old boy, sold to a research facility, dead, after 5 years of whatever unspeakable things they'd done to him. Annette set the file aside. Then another, and another. By the time Vernon burst in, his face purple with a rage that bordered on madness, she had separated out the worst of them. "What are you doing?" he snarled, eyes darting to the incriminating pile. "Destroy everything. No, I own you, Annette. 40 years. You've done what you're told." 40 years too long, she retorted, her voice trembling but resolute. She stood, clutching the damning files. David Marsh was 5. The twins were 7. Baby Catherine was 18 months old. You sold babies to medical researchers.
Vernon lunged for the files. Annette pulled back, and the papers scattered across the polished floor. Photos of smiling children, cold payment receipts, death certificates from institutions that were little more than torture chambers. "You sentimental fool," Vernon spat, his voice dripping with venom. "They were throwaways. No one wanted them." "I wanted them." The words tore from Annette's throat, raw and anguished. "I loved those children, every one of them, and you made me help send them away." Vernon's phone rang, a shrill jolt. His lawyer. "They're at the gate. Federal agents, 2 minutes." He looked from the scattered files to Annette, a cold calculation in his eyes. Then, from his desk drawer, he pulled a gun. "You're going to tell them you stole those documents, forged them," he hissed, the barrel glinting ominously. "That you were obsessed with me, created this whole fantasy." "No." Annette's voice was barely a whisper, but unwavering. "Then you're going to have a terrible accident. Distraught employee caught stealing takes her own life." He raised the gun. But before he could act, the door flew open. Ruth and Richard stood there, flanked by 2 FBI agents. "Mr. Whitmore, put the weapon down." Vernon turned the gun toward Ruth, his face contorted with hatred. "This is all her doing. Her and her crazy mother."
An agent fired. Vernon cried out, clutching his shoulder as the gun clattered to the floor. As they cuffed him, his eyes burned into Annette with pure, unadulterated loathing. 40 years I kept you safe, gave you purpose. This is how you repay me? You kept me prisoner, Annette whispered, her voice devoid of emotion, a lifetime of servitude finally broken. She knelt, gathering the scattered files, and handed them to the FBI agent. These are the children who didn't go to families, the ones he sold for experiments. The agent's face went pale as he read. How many? 12 that I've found so far, maybe more. They led Vernon out on a stretcher, news cameras flashing, eager to capture the downfall of a titan. Annette followed, finally ready to speak the truth she'd held captive for 4 decades. In the chaos, Ruth found her. My mother remembers you, Ruth said gently. Says you were kind to the children. Annette's gaze was distant, haunted. Not kind enough. I should have stopped it, should have known. You were 19, Ruth reminded her. He was your employer. The sheriff backed him up. Annette pulled out a small, tarnished key. There's something else. A storage unit off Route 12. Vernon didn't know I knew about it. I followed him once, years ago. She pressed the key into Ruth's hand. Unit 47. I think it's things from the orphanage. The storage facility was a desolate, decaying structure, barely functional. Unit 47's lock was rusted, but turned with a grating groan. Inside, boxes were stacked to the ceiling, a silent mausoleum of forgotten lives. Ruth opened the first one. Children's clothes, worn shoes, faded report cards, blurry photos. Not evidence of crimes, but evidence of lives. Who these children were before they became inventory. Richard found a box of letters. These are from after, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Letters from bought children to the families they'd left behind, never sent. He read aloud, his voice cracking.
Dear Sister Agnes, my new family's nice, but I miss you. They don't pray like you taught me. Love, Mary Catherine. And, Dear Jimmy, I hope you got adopted too. Remember our secret fort? I think about it all the time. Your friend, Michael. At the bottom of another box, Ruth found what she was looking for. A bundle of papers tied with a faded ribbon. Admission records, chillingly detailed beyond the official ledger. Grace Caldwell, admitted March 3, 1968. Pregnant by assault. Family refused to keep her. Baby due, January 1969. Note from Vernon. Young, healthy, good bloodline. Baby should fetch premium price. Mother can be placed for domestic service after delivery. Ruth sat down hard on a dusty box, the air knocked from her lungs. Her mother had been raped, then discarded by her own family, only to be sold along with her unborn child. Trauma layered upon unspeakable trauma. Her phone rang. It was Maggie. "Mom, it's everywhere. Every news channel. They're saying you exposed a 40-year trafficking ring. Is the journalist running the story?" "Front page tomorrow," Ruth murmured, her voice hollow. "But Mom, there's something else. A woman called here, says she has information about Willowbrook, says she was the night nurse in 1968, wants to talk to you." Ruth jotted down the details. Helen Garrett, living in a nursing home 2 states away. They drove through the night, a desperate journey toward another piece of the puzzle.
Helen Garrett, 91 years old, her eyes sharp despite her age, greeted them. "I've waited 40 years for someone to ask," she stated, her voice surprisingly strong. "Vernon Whitmore destroyed those children, but I was a coward, took his money and ran." "You were there that night?" Ruth prompted. "December 15th, 1968? "I worked a night shift," Helen confirmed, her hands twisting the blanket on her lap. "Vernon called me in special, said the children were being relocated for their safety." She shuddered, a memory too vivid. "But I saw their faces. They were terrified, begging not to go. All 43. All of them loaded into vehicles like cargo. The little ones crying for their dolls. Vernon had promised they could take them, then changed his mind at the last moment." Helen pulled out an old photo album, its pages yellowed with time. "I took pictures. Thought someday someone should know." Blurry black and white images. Children being herded into trucks. Vernon directing men with clipboards. Sheriff Pike standing guard. And in one, a young, heavily pregnant girl, her face turned toward the camera, being helped into a van. Grace, Ruth's mother. Proof she was there that night. "Why didn't you report it?" Richard asked, his voice tight. "To whom?" Helen scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Vernon owned the police, the judges, the newspaper." She turned a page. "But I kept track of some of them, the ones I could find." A list of names and locations, pieced together from rumors, occasional sightings, fragments of information. Tommy Randall became Thomas Morrison in Boston. Saw his high school graduation photo in a paper, recognized his eyes. Alice Henley became Alice Henderson in Philadelphia. Her adoptive mother sent a thank you card to the orphanage, not knowing it was closed. She paused, her voice heavy. "The twins, Henry and Harold, I heard they died at Marshfield within a year. Medical trials for a new psychiatric drug." Ruth photographed everything. More evidence, more proof, more children to find. As they left, Helen grabbed Ruth's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Your mother, Grace, she talked about you constantly before you were born, said she'd name you Spring because you were going to be her new beginning.
Even after everything she had been through, she had hope for you.
Back at the motel, Ruth's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, FBI agents. Then, a different call. "Is this Ruth Caldwell?" An elderly female voice asked, tentative, hopeful. "Yes. My name is Mary Catherine O'Brien. I think I was one of the Willowbrook children. I saw the news. The doll with the Bible, that was mine. Sister Agnes gave it to me for my first communion." Another survivor. "Where are you, Mary Catherine?" "Denver. My adoptive parents told me I came from a home for troubled children. Said my birth parents were dead. But I always wondered why I had no pictures, no records, nothing from before age 8. They talked for an hour, 2 lives finally converging across decades of silence. Mary Catherine remembered the dolls, the broken promise they'd come back for them the night they left. She remembered Grace, pregnant and scared, remembered trying to comfort the younger children. "Will there be a reunion for those of us who survived?" Mary Catherine asked, hope trembling in her voice. Ruth looked at the growing list of names. 17 confirmed survivors so far, 26 still missing. "Yes," she promised, her voice unwavering. "Yes, there will be." After she hung up, Ruth found Annette in the hotel lobby, surrounded by FBI agents and lawyers. She looked older, frailer, but somehow also lighter, as if testifying had lifted a physical weight from her soul. "They want me to identify the children in the photos," Annette said, her voice clear. "Match them to the files. I remember them all, every face, every name." "Will Vernon go to prison?" "His lawyer is already negotiating, claims he's too old, too sick. But the FBI says with trafficking across state lines, the medical experiments, the death certificates, he'll die in prison." It wasn't enough. Could never be enough. But it was something.
Ruth's phone buzzed. A text from the nurse at her mother's facility. "Grace is asking for you. She's remembering things. Lots of things. Not all of them good. The price of truth." Her mother's fog lifting meant confronting 40 years of stolen life. "I have to go," Ruth told Annette. "My mother needs me." "Tell her—" Annette paused, struggling for the words, for a lifetime of regret to be condensed into a single message. "Tell her I'm sorry for all of it, for not being brave enough to stop it." As Ruth drove toward Cedar Falls, toward her mother, toward whatever came next, she thought about those dolls. 43 children's treasures waiting in darkness for 40 years. Tomorrow, she'd go back for all of them. Every doll, every treasure, every piece of evidence that these children had existed, had been loved, had been worth more than the prices Vernon put on them. They deserved that much. They deserved to be remembered whole.
The FBI task force transformed the small Millbrook Community Center into a makeshift command post. Boxes of evidence lined the walls. Vernon's files, the rescued dolls from the hidden room, Helen Garrett's photos, decades of financial records. Special Agent Diana Brooks addressed the crowded room. FBI agents, state police, reporters held behind a rope line, and 17 confirmed survivors who had traveled from across the country, their faces etched with a shared history of trauma and resilience. "We've identified 31 of the 43 children so far," Brooks announced, her voice grave. 17 alive, 14 confirmed deceased, 12 still missing. She pointed to a board covered with photos, young faces frozen in time. Every child was sold. Prices ranged from $5,000 to $25,000 based on age, health, and other factors. Ruth sat with Richard, Lisa, and Mary Catherine. Over the past week, they had formed an unlikely family, bound by shared trauma and stolen childhoods. The facilities,
The research places. What did they do to those children? Agent Brooks's jaw tightened. Marshfield Institute ran psychiatric drug trials from 1968 to 1975. Blackwood Research tested developmental theories on children with disabilities. Both have been shut down for decades, but we're exhuming records. How many died? Prist pressed in his voice.
At least 7 that we can confirm. David Marsh, age 5. The Carpenter twins, Henry and Harold, age 7. Davy Catherine, 18 months. Brooks read each name slowly, deliberately, giving each lost child their moment of recognition. We're still investigating. An elderly man in the back stood up, his face pale and drawn. I'm Dr. Marcus Webb. I worked at Marshfield in 1969. I was young, just out of medical school. They told us the children were wards of the state, volunteered for the greater good. The room erupted. Lisa, her face contorted with fury, threw her water bottle at him. Volunteered? They were children. I know. I'm sorry. That's why I'm here. Dr. Webb pulled out a thick folder. I kept records secretly. Everything they did to those kids, the drugs, the doses, the effects. I was too much of a coward to speak up then, but maybe this helps now. Agent Brooks took the folder, flipping through it, her face going white with horror. Jesus Christ! These were children! Subject W31 showed adverse reaction to experimental compound, fever, hallucinations, seizures. Webb's voice was hollow, filled with a lifetime of guilt. That was David Marsh, 5 years old, loved trains, used to make train sounds during the treatments, trying to take himself somewhere else. Ruth stood up, her voice a steel-edged blade. Where's Vernon? County Hospital, under guard. His lawyer is claiming dementia, saying he's unfit for trial. I want to see him. That's not advisable. I don't care what's advisable. That man sold my mother when she was 15 and pregnant. Let me see him. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and fear. Vernon lay propped up, shoulder bandaged, cuffed to the bed rail. He looked smaller somehow, ordinary, not the towering monster who'd controlled 43 children's fates. Come to gloat? His voice was still strong, still imbued with the same arrogant superiority. Come to understand why, Ruth countered, her gaze unwavering. Why? Vernon laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. Do you know what happened to orphanage kids in the 60s? Aged out, thrown away, became society's problems. I gave them families. You gave 12 of them to medical researchers. Defectives, disturbed. They would have been institutionalized anyway. Ruth pulled out David Marsh's photo. He was 5. He loved trains. He was damaged goods, Vernon sneered. Violent outbursts, learning disabilities. No family would take him. So you sold him to be experimented on? I found him placement. The institute paid for his care. They killed him. Vernon shrugged, a gesture of casual indifference that made Ruth's blood run cold. He would have died in a state institution anyway. At least this way, his life contributed to medical knowledge. Ruth wanted to hit him. Instead, she pulled out another photo. The twins, Henry and Harold, 7 years old. Their only crime was being developmentally delayed. Their parents were dead, no relatives. They were heading for Penhurst or Willowbrook State School. You know what happened in those places. At least Marshfield was clean, modern. Marshfield pumped them full of experimental drugs until their hearts gave out. I didn't know the specifics. You knew enough. You cashed the checks.
Vernon's eyes narrowed, a flicker of his old venom returning. You think you're righteous? A hero? You've destroyed hundreds of lives with this crusade. The families who adopted those children thinking they were legitimate, the survivors who were happy not knowing, your own mother who was safe and cared for? My mother was drugged into forgetting her own daughter. Your mother was a 15-year-old rape victim whose family threw her away. I gave her shelter. When she had you, I could have dumped her at a state hospital. Instead, I found placement for both of you. You sold us. I saved you. The family that bought you gave you a good life, didn't they? Education, opportunities? Vernon leaned forward as much as his restraints allowed, his eyes burning with a twisted conviction. Every one of those children got better lives than they would have had, even the ones at the institutes. They had food, shelter, medical care. They had torture disguised as treatment. They had more than they would have gotten otherwise. His voice turned cold, chillingly devoid of empathy. You want to know the truth? The real truth? Nobody wanted those kids. Their parents were dead or addicts or just didn't care. Society wanted them invisible. I made them disappear, and everyone was happier for it. The children weren't happier. The children didn't matter. They never do. That's what you don't understand. Vernon lay back, a weary, triumphant sigh escaping him. I gave society what it wanted, a solution to unwanted children, and I got rich doing it. That's not evil. That's capitalism. Ruth stood to leave, the stench of antiseptic and Vernon's chilling words clinging to her. There was nothing more to say, no understanding to be found in the twisted logic of a monster.
At the door, Ruth turned back, her gaze fixed on Vernon Whitmore, a man stripped bare of his power, yet still radiating a chilling defiance. 17 survivors are testifying at your trial. The FBI has all your records, every payment, every placement, every death. Her voice was a pronouncement, not a threat. You're going to die in prison. Vernon merely smiled, a predatory gleam in his aged eyes. I'm 85 years old. How long do you think I have anyway? His smile widened, a venomous twist. But those families who bought children, they'll be investigated, exposed, lives ruined. The survivors will be hounded by media, defined forever as victims. You haven't saved anyone, Miss Caldwell. You've just spread the misery around. Outside the sterile room, Agent Brooks awaited, her expression unreadable. Get what you needed? He's not sorry, Ruth breathed, the weight of Vernon's unapologetic evil pressing down on her. Not even a little. They never are, Brooks conceded, a grim acknowledgement. But we have enough to bury him. She handed Ruth a folder. We found 3 more survivors, and this, a facility in Oregon that took 4 children in 1969, still operating under a different name. Ruth's phone rang, pulling her back to a more immediate, tender ache. It was the nurse from Cedar Falls. Your mother's having a rough day. Keeps asking for the other children. Says she needs to know they're okay. I'll be right there.
Grace sat in the day room, surrounded by the faded photographs Ruth had meticulously gathered. The children of Willowbrook, their youthful faces frozen in time, stared back at her. I remember them all, Grace whispered, her frail finger tracing each image. Tommy always shared his cookies. Alice sang to the babies when they cried. Mary Catherine helped me when the morning sickness was bad. 17 are still alive, Mom, Ruth said softly, sitting beside her, taking her trembling hand. They want to meet you. And the others? Grace's eyes, though clearer now, held a deep sorrow. Ruth squeezed her hand.
Not everyone made it. Grace nodded slowly, a profound grief settling upon her. The twins, Henry and Harold, they weren't right, Vernon said, but they were sweet boys, just needed more help than others. Her voice cracked. They died at a research facility. Drug trials. I know, Ruth murmured. Part of me always knew. Grace picked up another photo. Baby Catherine, so tiny. Who takes a baby for medical experiments? Someone who saw dollar signs instead of children, Ruth replied, the bitterness sharp in her tone. They sat in silence for a moment, the unspoken horrors filling the space. Then Grace looked up, a fierce spark in her gaze. What happens to Vernon? Trial starts next month. He'll die in prison. It's not enough, Grace stated, a quiet, unwavering conviction. No, Ruth agreed. It's not. Grace gathered the photos, her movements slow but deliberate. I want to help with the trial, with finding the others. I lost 40 years, but I'm not dead yet.
That evening, the community center hummed with a different kind of energy. 17 people, once scattered like seeds in a brutal wind, were finally reunited. Richard Morrison and Lisa Randall, having discovered their connection, realized they weren't just randomly matched siblings, they'd share the room at Willowbrook. Mary Catherine O'Brien found her best friend from the orphanage, now Michael Patterson, living just 2 states away. They compared memories, fragments of forgotten childhoods, piecing together a mosaic of resilience. Who liked which songs? Who was afraid of storms? Who told the best stories? Remember the Christmas pageant? Mary Catherine asked, her eyes shining with a mixture of joy and pain. December 14th, the night before? You were Mary, Lisa remembered, a smile touching her lips. Tommy was Joseph. The twins were sheep. Vernon watched from the back, Michael added, a shadow falling over his face. I thought he looked proud. Now I know, he was calculating prices. A hesitant figure appeared in the doorway. Annette. A hush fell over the room. I know you hate me, she began, her voice small. We don't hate you, Mary Catherine replied, her voice soft but firm. You were as much a victim as us. No, I was an adult. I should have known, should have stopped it. You were 19, Ruth interjected, her voice compassionate. He was your employer. The entire system supported him. Annette pulled out a box, her hands trembling slightly. I brought something from the storage unit. She opened it, revealing dozens of small, cherished items. A hair ribbon, a child's drawing, a wooden whistle, a lucky penny that hadn't made it into the dolls. Each survivor found something of theirs, tangible proof they'd existed before that terrifying night. Proof they'd been real children with real lives, not just inventory numbers in Vernon's chilling ledger. Agent Brooks called Ruth aside, her voice low. We've tracked down 3 more, but there's something else. One of the families that bought a child, they want to come forward, cooperate. They say they didn't know it was trafficking. Do you believe them? Brooks hesitated. Their son, one of the Willowbrook 43, he killed himself 10 years ago, left a note saying he remembered being sold, remembered his real name. They want to help find the others. The web kept expanding, each thread pulled revealing more connections, more complicity, more widespread damage, but also more survivors, more truth, more chance for justice, however delayed. As the evening ended, Ruth found her mother sitting with Annette, looking at photos of the children. We failed them, Grace was saying, her voice filled with quiet despair. All of us, who were old enough to know better. We failed those babies.
We were children, too, Annette replied, her eyes distant. Even at 19, I was a child facing a monster. Maybe, but they deserved better than what they got. Better than any of us. Ruth thought about the dolls still in the evidence room. 43 children's treasures, waiting 40 years for their owners to return. Tomorrow, she'd petition to have them released after the trial, return them to survivors, give them to families of the deceased. Let those precious items finally complete their journey home. It was a small thing, but after 40 years of enormous wrongs, maybe small things mattered most.
The courthouse steps were packed. A sea of faces, survivors, reporters, protesters with signs reading, "Justice for the 43" and "Children are not for sale." Vernon Whitmore arrived in a wheelchair he didn't need, playing frail for the cameras, a final act of manipulation. Ruth sat in the front row with her mother, surrounded by the growing family of survivors. Vernon's lawyers had fought fiercely to bar Grace's testimony, claiming mental incompetence. But Grace had passed every evaluation, her mind sharp and clear now that the forced medication had finally cleared. The defense will argue that Mr. Whitmore ran a legitimate private adoption service, the prosecutor began, his voice resonating with authority. That all placements were legal under 1968 standards. But we will prove he trafficked children across state lines for profit, falsified documents, and sold 12 children to medical research facilities where 7 died. Vernon's lawyer rose, a picture of calm confidence. My client is an 85-year-old philanthropist who's donated millions to this community. These allegations stem from a disturbed woman's fantasy and illegally obtained documents. Objection, the prosecutor countered. The documents were legally seized under warrant. Sustained. The first witness was Richard Morrison. He held up his adoption papers. Forged, the FBI determined. Then, the receipt his adoptive father had hidden. $12,000 cash for a 9-year-old boy. They bought me like furniture. Vernon's lawyer tried to shake him. Your adoptive parents loved you, didn't they? Gave you everything? They gave me everything except the truth, Richard shot back, his voice thick with raw emotion. I had a name before they changed it, a history, a St. Christopher medal from my dead father that meant everything to me. His voice cracked. I left it in a doll, thinking I'd come back for it. Lisa testified next, then Mary Catherine. Each survivor took the stand, their voices painting a chilling picture of children told they were going to Christmas families, temporary placements, be back soon.
On day 3, Annette testified. Vernon stared at her with such visceral hatred that the judge had to warn him. I made 43 dolls on December 15th, 1968, Annette said, her voice steady now, resolute. Mr. Whitmore told me it was for safekeeping. The children put their most precious possessions inside, items from dead parents, grandparents, the only things they had left of their families. And what happened to these dolls? The prosecutor asked, his voice gentle. They stayed in that hidden room for 40 years because the children never came back, because Mr. Whitmore sold them. The defense attorney stood, his tone dismissive. Miss Briggs, you've worked for Mr. Whitmore for 40 years. Were you paid well? Yes. Given benefits, bonuses? Yes. So you profited from these alleged crimes? Annette lifted her chin, her gaze unwavering. He threatened me, had me institutionalized when I tried to speak up, kept me close to ensure my silence. Yes, he paid me. It was the price of my captivity.
Dr. Webb testified about Marshfield Institute. The prosecutor displayed photos of the 5 children who died there. David Marsh, the Carpenter twins, baby Catherine, William Doe. They never even recorded his real name. We administered experimental psychotropic drugs, doses that would be criminal today. The children suffered seizures, hallucinations, organ failure. We were told they were volunteers. 5-year-olds can't volunteer for medical experiments, the prosecutor stated, a quiet accusation. I know that now, Webb replied, tears welling in his eyes. Helen Garrett, 91, wheeled in by a nurse, provided the most damning testimony. Her blurry black and white photos from that night. Children crying as they were loaded into trucks. Vernon with his clipboard checking off names like inventory. That one, she pointed to a photo, shows Mr. Whitmore taking money from a man beside a van. That man took 3 children, the younger ones. Vernon's lawyer objected repeatedly, but the photos, indisputable proof, were allowed. On day 7, Grace took the stand. State your name. Grace Caldwell. I was Grace Caldwell at 15. I've been Grace Caldwell for 55 years, though Mr. Whitmore tried to erase me. She testified for 3 agonizing hours. Her assault, her family's abandonment, arriving at Willowbrook pregnant and terrified the night they were taken.
They said I was going to a family who wanted a teenage mother and baby together. Special circumstances, Mr. Whitmore called it. I was relieved, thought maybe someone would love us both. What happened instead? I was driven to Baltimore, gave birth alone except for a doctor who wouldn't look at me. They told me my baby died, showed me a death certificate, then they drugged me. Grace's voice stayed steady, remarkably strong. I woke up in a psychiatric facility, spent 20 years there. Mr. Whitmore paid for it all, kept we medicated, told everyone I was delusional. But your baby didn't die. No. My daughter is sitting right there. Grace pointed to Ruth, a fierce love burning in her eyes. They sold her to another family, told me she was dead, told her I was dead. 40 years of lies. Vernon's lawyer stood for cross-examination. Ms. Caldwell, you spent 20 years in psychiatric care. How can we trust your memory? Because I never forgot. The drugs made me foggy, confused, compliant. But I never forgot my baby's first cry, never forgot the ultrasound I saved, never forgot that Mr. Whitmore stood in the delivery room and took her away while I screamed. You were 15, traumatized. Perhaps you imagined. I imagined nothing. Grace's eyes blazed, a lifetime of suppressed fury erupting. That man sold 43 children, sold my baby while I watched, sold me to a different kind of prison, and made millions doing it. Vernon, against his lawyer's fervent advice, insisted on testifying. He took the stand slowly, playing up his age and infirmity. But when he spoke, his innate arrogance shone through, undimmed. I ran a private orphanage, found homes for unwanted children. If money changed hands, it was for administrative costs. The prosecutor approached, holding the ledger like a weapon. Administrative costs of exactly $8,000 for Tommy Randall, $12,000 for James Morrison, $25,000 for Grace Caldwell and her baby. Placement fees varied based on circumstances. What circumstances made baby Catherine worth $5,000 to Blackwood Research? Special needs children required special placements. She was 18 months old. Her special need was being a toddler. Vernon's composure finally cracked. These children had no future, he roared, abandoning all pretense of benevolence. I gave them opportunities. You gave them to researchers who killed them.
I gave them care they wouldn't have gotten otherwise. You gave them death sentences. I gave society what it wanted." Vernon shouted, standing straighter now, his voice rising in a crescendo of self-justification. "Those children were throwaways, defectives, burdens. Everyone wanted them gone, and I made them gone." The courtroom went silent, stunned by his brazen admission. "I made them disappear, and everyone thanked me for it. The state, the county, the families who got perfect children without messy histories. Even the ones who went to facilities, they contributed to science." "They were children," the prosecutor said quietly, cutting through Vernon's rant. "They were problems I solved."
The jury deliberated for a mere 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. 43 counts of human trafficking, 12 counts of conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, falsification of documents, conspiracy, child endangerment. Vernon was sentenced to 240 years in prison. At 85, even 1 year was likely a life sentence. As they led him out, he passed Ruth, his eyes burning with undimmed malice. "You destroyed everything I built." "You destroyed 43 children," Ruth countered, her voice steady, victorious. "Your empire was built on their graves." 26 are still missing, he sneered, a final chilling smile on his lips. "You'll never find them all. Some stories don't get happy endings." Outside the courthouse, the survivors gathered. 17 who testified, plus 5 more found during the trial, 22 of the 43. The FBI had set up a fund for the survivors, seized from Vernon's vast assets. Not enough to compensate for stolen lives, but something. "What now?" Mary Catherine asked, her voice tinged with both relief and uncertainty. "Now we keep searching," Ruth declared, looking out at the faces of her newfound family. 21 still missing. "Some might not want to be found," Richard pointed out, ever practical. "Some might not even know they're missing." Grace stood with Annette, both women looking older, but somehow lighter, as if the weight of years had finally begun to lift. "We tell their stories anyway," Grace said, her voice gaining strength. "All 43, so they're not forgotten again."
That evening, Ruth returned to Willowbrook one last time. The building was scheduled for demolition, but first she had permission to retrieve the dolls. She entered the hidden room with Agent Brooks and a forensics team. Each doll was carefully cataloged, photographed, then placed in evidence boxes. Tommy's with the St. Christopher medal, Alice's with the wedding ring, Mary Catherine's with the Bible, Grace's with the ultrasound. As they packed the last doll, Brooks found something else, a small leather-bound notebook wedged behind the shelf. Vernon's meticulous handwriting, dated December 14, 1968. Final inventory complete, buyers confirmed, routes planned. By tomorrow night, Willowbrook will be empty, and I'll be rich. These fools actually think they're coming back, even made dolls for their pathetic treasures, as if anyone would want reminders of where they came from. Ruth held the notebook, this final, undeniable evidence of Vernon's casual cruelty. He'd known exactly what he was doing, known he was destroying lives, and had laughed about it. "We need to copy this for evidence," Brooks said, her voice tight with disgust. "But after the appeals are done, you can have it, you and the other survivors. Proof that he knew. Proof that you were never forgotten, just deliberately erased." As they left Willowbrook for the last time, Ruth looked back at the decaying building. Tomorrow it would be rubble,
but the truth would survive. In her car, she found her mother waiting. "Did you get them all? The dolls?" "Every one." "Good." Grace held the ultrasound photo, now laminated and worn smooth from countless touches. They deserve to go home, even if home is just a memory now. 21 still missing, Mom. Then we keep looking, Grace replied, her gaze firm, infused with a newfound purpose. We owe them that much. Ruth started the car, driving away from Willowbrook one final time. In the rearview mirror, the building disappeared into the deepening darkness. But somewhere out there, 21 people didn't know their real names, didn't know they'd once left treasures and dolls, believing they'd come back. The search would continue.
6 months later, the memorial garden stood where Willowbrook Orphanage once crumbled. 43 stone markers, each engraved with a name, age, and the haunting date, December 15, 1968. 22 markers had fresh flowers, vibrant against the gray stone. 21 stood bare, waiting. Ruth knelt beside one, Grace Caldwell, age 15. Her mother stood behind her, finally free of the psychiatric facility, living in her own apartment with support care. "Feels strange," Grace said, a wistful smile touching her lips. "Having a grave marker when I'm not dead?" "You were dead for 40 years, Ruth replied, her voice soft but firm. "This marks your resurrection." Across the garden, survivors placed their retrieved treasures beside their markers. Richard set his St. Christopher medal on its chain around his stone. Mary Catherine pressed her Bible into a weatherproof case beside hers. Each item returned, each promise finally kept. The 21 empty markers hurt most. Some had first names only. Catherine, 18 months. David, age 5. Others, just initials from Vernon's ledger. J.R., age 11. Annette arrived with a van full of children. Not Willowbrook children, but their children and grandchildren. 3 generations gathered to witness what had been hidden. "My dad never knew his real name," a young woman said, placing drugstore flowers by a marker reading W31, unknown, age 8. She continued, her voice filled with emotion. "Died thinking he was nobody from nowhere. But he was somebody. He was one of the 43.
The FBI had tracked down 7 more survivors in 6 months. Each one thought they were alone, feeling disconnected, a profound emptiness stemming from having no history before age 3 or 5 or 8. DNA testing connected them to biological siblings in the group, proving their origins. But 7 found meant 14 still missing, some probably dead, others living lives built on lies, never knowing. Agent Brooks attended the dedication, bringing news. Vernon Whitmore died last night, heart attack in his cell. Nobody cried. Richard spat on the ground. Too easy. "He died knowing he lost everything," Ruth said, her voice thoughtful. "His money, his reputation, his freedom. That has to be enough." "Is it?" Lisa asked, her gaze sweeping across the empty markers. "Is it enough?" They stood in silence, no answer coming. A car pulled up. An elderly woman emerged, helped by a younger man. She walked slowly to the memorial, her eyes searching the stones until she found one. Alice Henley, age 5. "I'm Alice," she announced to the group, her voice clear and strong. "Was Alice Henderson for 50 years, but I'm taking my name back." She pulled out a small jewelry box. "My adoptive mother gave me this when she was dying. Said it belonged to my birth mother. Told me I was bought from a man named Whitmore. Paid $10,000 cash."
Earl Hensley, 93 and bent with age, began to cry, great racking sobs. "Alice, little Alice, you're my brother's girl.
He died in that fire with your mama. I brought you to Willowbrook because I couldn't. I was too young, too poor." They embraced, family reunited after 55 years. "I remembered you," Alice whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Sunday visits, peppermint candies. Then one day you didn't come. They told me you were adopted. Happy, better off without reminders of the past. They lied about everything." As the ceremony continued, Ruth noticed a woman standing apart, watching from the road, middle-aged, well-dressed, holding a folder. Ruth approached. "Can I help you?" "I'm Dr. Sarah Coleman. I work at Riverside Medical, used to be Marshfield Institute." She handed Ruth the folder. "I've been going through old records, found these medical files for the 12 children sold to research facilities. Detailed records of experiments, drugs administered, reactions observed, the horror reduced to clinical notes. David Marsh died March 3, 1973, Dr. Coleman read, her voice tight. Cause listed as adverse reaction to experimental compound MK47. Real cause? We poisoned a 5-year-old boy to see what would happen." "Why are you showing me this?" "Because there's more. 2 children survived Marshfield, were transferred to state custody in 1975 when the institute closed." She pulled out another paper. "William Doe and Jane Doe. Never identified properly. Based on ages and descriptions, they're from Willowbrook. 2 more possibly found. Where are they now? William died in 2003, State Hospital. But Jane is alive, permanently institutionalized, severe psychological damage from the experiments, but alive." Ruth's hands shook. "Where?" "At Riverside Medical. Has been for 30 years. We just never knew who she was." They drove immediately to Riverside. In a secured ward, a woman sat painting, 60 years old, but looking ancient, her hands trembling from decades of medication, but her eyes, alert, held a profound sadness. "Jane," Dr. Coleman asked gently, "there are people here who might know you."
Jane looked up, studying Ruth's face, then Grace's, then the photos Ruth carried of the Willowbrook children. She pointed to one photo, a little girl about 4, holding a stuffed rabbit. "Me," she whispered, the first word she'd spoken in years, according to Dr. Coleman. "That's me." They compared the ledger. W33, Margaret Sullivan, age 4. Parents died in car accident, no relatives. Sold to Marshfield for $7,000. "Margaret," Ruth said, her voice filled with emotion. "Your name is Margaret Sullivan." Margaret/Jane began to cry. "Maggie. They called me Maggie. Had a bunny. Put it in the doll. Said I could get it back." Grace sat beside her, took her damaged hands. "We came back for you. Took 40 years, but we came back." The dedication ceremony was postponed as survivors rushed to Riverside. 24 of 43 now accounted for. Margaret Sullivan would never live independently. The experiments had damaged her too severely. But she would know her name, know she was remembered. That evening, Vernon's estate was officially liquidated. $15 million distributed to survivors and families of the deceased. Not enough to buy back 40 years, but an acknowledgment of debt owed. Ruth stood with her mother in the memorial garden as sunset painted the stones gold. "We found 24, Grace said, her voice softened by the day's events. 19 still missing. Maybe that's all we get. Maybe some stories don't have endings." Ruth thought about the empty stones, the dolls whose owners never returned, the treasures that would never be reclaimed. Then her phone rang. Unknown number, California area code.
Is this Ruth Caldwell, the woman investigating Willowbrook? Yes? My name is Patricia Williams. I'm 61 years old. 3 days ago, I saw the news about the trial. There was a photo of a doll with a locket inside. A half-heart locket. The woman's voice broke. I have the other half. Had it my whole life. My adoptive parents said it came with me, but they didn't know from where. Ruth's pulse raced. The twins' locket. Twins, Patricia gasped. I have a twin? Had. I'm sorry. Your sister died 5 years ago. But she searched for you her whole life. Her daughter has been looking for you. Patricia was crying now. What was her name? Penelope. Penny. You were Patty and Penny Hartley. Patty, she repeated, the name tasting foreign and familiar on her tongue. My name was Patty.
25 found. As Ruth hung up, she looked at the memorial stones. 18 still empty, but no longer forgotten. The local historical society had agreed to maintain the garden permanently. School children would visit, learn the story, understand what happened when society decided some children mattered less than others. A year later, 3 more survivors were found through DNA testing. One had become a senator, never knowing his origin. Another was homeless, always feeling disconnected from the family that raised him. The third had spent her life in therapy, trying to understand why she felt bought. Vernon Whitmore's name became synonymous with child trafficking. Laws changed, adoption records opened. Other orphanages were investigated. Ruth published a book with all 43 stories, even the incomplete ones. She donated profits to survivor funds and organizations fighting human trafficking. At the 5th anniversary memorial, 31 survivors and their families gathered. The empty stones now had photos beside them, faces rescued from old records. Grace spoke at the ceremony, still fragile but determined. 43 children disappeared on December 15, 1968. Today, we've found 31. 12 died too young, stolen twice, first from their families, then from life itself. Some were sold to loving families who never knew, others to researchers who knew exactly what they were doing. All of us lost decades to one man's greed. She paused, looked at the stones, her gaze encompassing the past and the present. But we survived. We found each other. We spoke the truth. And as long as these stones stand, what happened to us will never be forgotten. The 12 still missing, if they're out there, know this: you were wanted, you were loved, you were worth more than the prices put on you, and we'll never stop looking. Ruth stood beside her mother, Maggie, her own daughter, named for Margaret Sullivan, on her other side. 3 generations healing from wounds inflicted before 2 of them were even born. The local news filmed the ceremony, but by then the story had faded from national attention. Other scandals, other tragedies had replaced it. But in Millbrook, the memorial stood. 43 stones, 43 names, 43 children who were sold but not erased. And in a hidden room's memory, 43 dolls had waited in darkness until someone finally came back. The treasures were home, even if some of the children never would be. In Ruth's house, in a special cabinet, she kept Grace's doll, the one that held the ultrasound. Sometimes she held it, thinking about circles closing, promises kept, truths that took 40 years to tell. Her mother was alive, damaged but alive. She was found. They were both found. It had to be enough. It was enough.